Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and somehow I convinced myself that I could make an entire illustrated children's book in 24 hours. From this pure act of hubris, this video was born. I mean, I only have to design characters, come up with a story, write out rhyming prose that tells the story, lay out all the pages, and then illustrate the entire thing. It's just a children's book, how hard could it be? Right guys? To help me keep this project together, I'm going to use Milanote, the sponsor of this video and one of my absolute favorite tools for project building. I'm going to build a board that will hold together everything that I need as far as images, notes, sketches, kind of whatever comes to my mind while I'm starting to work. So making even a short children's book is a big project, and I'm going to start this board with a to-do list just like I have done with my VTuber project and my game jam. First task, I've got to collect up some inspiration. Initially, I was just placing it all on the main board, but I quickly realized I have so many inspirations, I'll need to separate them into 3 subboards. First, a subboard to collect up all my favorite childhood books for some direct inspiration. Seeing all the images together like this makes it easier to see the similarities and patterns and will help guide me when I start drawing. This was so nostalgic, seeing pictures from the Runaway Bunny and Peter Rabbit was really getting me in the right mindset. I put in a couple notes to keep track of things that popped into my mind as I collected these, and even did a little sketch of some bunnies because I was starting to think about using a rabbit character since they were so common in my childhood favorites. But the goal of this project is to make my perfect children's book, not the children's books that I already had, so this was only the first phase of collecting inspiration. Now I wanted to look back at some of my oldest interests broken up into 2 different age brackets. I had a lot of things I really was obsessed with and loved as a kid, so I'm going to make 2 more subboards, one for my childhood fixations from my early childhood and one from my later, almost into my preteen years. So here's my subboard for my childhood faves from 3 to 7. I was really obsessed with being a veterinarian. I had vet toys like this. I also had PC games that I loved. I think I got this one from the Scholastic Book Fair. I was also really interested in like virtual pets. I never had a Tamagotchi back in the day, but I was really interested in them. I also really loved Neopets, which was a still extant virtual pet game that you could play in a browser. And I just collected up a bunch of color swatches from this era as well, just to keep in mind what was kind of appealing to me when I was around these ages. These are kind of my main inspirations for this age bracket. And then in my childhood faves 8 to 12, sort of my preteen years and a little earlier as well, we have this board. So I was really interested in dragons. I was kind of obsessed with them to the point where I almost started to convince myself that they were real secretly. I also was really interested in ancient Egypt and mummification and stuff like the medieval ages and all of the weird medical stuff they would do back then. I was definitely getting into sort of darker topics and more fantastical kind of stuff. So this is kind of my inspiration here, and I have some little arrows kind of pointing around at my notes and all my focus points here. This book right here, Dragonology, it kind of changed everything for me. It helped make me even more obsessed with dragons because the illustrations were just so beautiful, and I liked how they made it seem almost kind of scientific. So on this main page, I also decided to put some placeholders in, so I have some color swatches here ready to be filled with the color palette that I will end up using. I also have this little sketch here I put in place of where the cover will go when we're actually finished with it, and I have some notes kind of leading to each other where I'm going to lay out the skeleton of the story. We also have some subboards ready for the sketches, which I'm about to start, and the character designs. I really do feel like if you're a visual thinker or you're working on a visual project, Milanote can be so helpful to you. They have loads of pre-made templates like mood boards, project plans, creative briefs, and they're all kind of designed to help you on your way with whatever it is you want to make. I get really overwhelmed personally, especially at the start of a project, and it can make it feel like you can't do the things that you're dreaming about. And so it actually is really meaningful to me to be able to put together all these loose thoughts and images that I have in my mind, Milanote even has a free browser plugin called the Web Clipper, where you can take any photo that you find, click the little icon in the corner, and then you'll be able to take those images with a link to the source and put it into any of the boards that you're making. It's really convenient and it makes your board building even simpler. You can sign up for Milanote now for free with no time limit using my link in the description. I highly recommend you try it out, and thank you so much to Milanote for sponsoring the channel. Okay, you saw the to-do list. We're going to start with an idea sketchbook, which is basically just what I call when I dump all my ideas in visual form with these little sketches. And I just keep doing this until I feel like I have a good idea of the story. I get a lot of questions about like where I get my ideas or how I get my ideas or how do I motivate myself when I'm really sitting down and I just need to make something and I don't really know what the story is going to be. This is usually how I start. I'll just let myself sketch kind of whatever, and it's really great to do this after you've collected a bunch of inspiration and reference and looked at a bunch of images that kind of invoke what you're hoping to make. It can really help jumpstart that part of your brain that's just going to like start coming up with stories for you. So I pretty quickly dialed in on the dragon thing because dragons were such a big obsession of mine, and I quickly found myself kind of in love with this idea of a really tiny dragon, in fact one that you could find under a rock. This is kind of marrying my two like different ages of childhood that I was talking about earlier, where I was discussing how I was kind of interested in dragons and stuff when I got older, and when I was younger I was more interested in just like animals and exploring outside. One of my favorite things to do when I was a little girl was to just go out into the backyard and catch bugs and put them in this little bug keeper that my dad made for me. He liked to do woodworking and craft different things, so he made me this little like enclosure that I could put bugs inside and then just sort of look at them. So this is basically like the culmination of that. It's about this scrappy little girl who goes outside, and when she's looking for bugs and grubs and all this nasty stuff that I really loved to find when I was a kid, she finds a tiny little dragon under the rock that she's picked up. So first I wanted to do the character design for the little girl. I had an idea pretty quickly that was sort of developing in my little slush sketchbook, but I really kind of tried to exaggerate it more, and I was really trying to think about how I could change my style to make it look a little bit more like a classic children's book. There were kind of two different types of children's book styles I was seeing a lot of. One was really detailed and kind of realistic, like the Runaway Bunny actually has pretty realistic rabbit faces. And then we have these like much more simplified styles, which I of course leaned towards because I knew that this project was going to be a really difficult challenge for 24 hours. So I definitely wanted to go more towards this like simplified Sanrio, Tamagotchi, like cutesy kind of style. Another thing I noticed in a lot of children's books, even ones that are done digitally and are more modern, is that they usually have a bit more of this traditional art touch. So I definitely wanted to use some digital brushes that would have kind of the warmth and the feel of something that's on real paper, a little bit more of a more naturalistic look to my lines, not something so smooth. So I ended up using a brush called the Blake. It's in the Kyle T. Webster makeup pack. I used it at 1.2 for the size. And I also wanted to explore with some like more painterly styles of rendering. I definitely didn't want to do anything really like cell shaded and hard and candy-like looking. I wanted it to look more like soft and almost kind of chalky and have a lot of texture. I was really ambitious with my initial color pass of this character. I never really named her. She's just kind of called Kiddo. That's something my parents would call me sometimes. And I basically just made her look like a really simplified, really cute little girl. I put a bunch of mud on her shoes as well. She has like these very cute, prim, girly shoes, but they're just like caked in mud. I kind of like that juxtaposition. Next, I wanted to do the dragon design, and I semi-intentionally made the dragon a little bit more like detailed and specific looking than the little girl. I think that it's a good idea if you're going to have a character who your audience is going to kind of put themselves along with, like are going to see themselves in. It's better to keep her more simple, but the dragon is kind of the point of interest in this story, so I wanted to make her a little bit more detailed and fun looking. I had this idea for the way that I drew her face that I kind of discovered in the sketchbook, and I really wanted to keep, where the mouth actually curves up above the lower part of the eye. Usually I hate this, like for some reason, it's kind of like a pet peeve of mine, this like kind of misordering of the facial features. But in this case, I really liked it. I think because in this art style, first of all, it looks kind of cute, and then second of all, I just found it made the dragon look a little bit less like just a lizard with wings and a little bit more like some kind of weird creature. I also thought that it made it look really interesting when it's expressing more and when it's opening its mouth. There's something kind of intriguing about the way that the face is set up. I was kind of struggling with it at first. I definitely didn't want it to look completely out of the art style that I was using for the girl, but I really didn't even have time to do many more passes on this, and I really liked that kind of center face that we have here. It looks a little mischievous and naughty, which I think is great. For the color palette, I was originally going to do a like creamy white color with rainbow spines down the back, but I quickly realized that that was going to be way too hard to draw in color. This is kind of foreshadowing for the future, but I honestly didn't simplify enough. But I ended up using sort of this dark salamandery color with these little pops of blue, and again, I'm using this gouache, like sort of dry brushy brush to give it some texture and make it look more traditional and less digital. So now I gotta put in the little outline. The to-do list is actually really helping me because this is so overwhelming. I kept having these moments where I was just like staring at the files, like kind of frozen in indecision. So I would just go back to the to-do list. This is something I do in real life as well. I do to-do lists on paper every morning because otherwise I just like freeze. And yeah, doing the little outline, it's a different kind of outline than what I usually do. With a children's board book, it's not like necessarily the structure that you might be used to in another type of story. There's usually a pattern that's quickly established that's then broke at the end, something I've noticed. So that's kind of the way I set it up. And then I started actually writing out the more like lyrical rhyming style of the actual text that I would put in the story. This was actually pretty hard. Originally I wasn't even going to put this in, but I decided to put in every single step that I did during this process so you guys could see literally everything. It is kind of embarrassing watching myself like type something out and then backspace, and then type something out and then backspace again. It's really hard to write something that's like would be fun to read aloud. That was the main thing I was trying to focus on, because like that's how I interfaced with these types of books, was obviously my mom and my dad reading them to me as a little girl, and so I wanted it to sound fun to be read aloud. I think that's kind of the point of the rhyming as well. And I had to kind of jam in the story while also worrying a lot about how much illustration work I was assigning myself. There's no hard and fast number of pages that like a board book or a children's book will have, but I didn't want to go too hard because I didn't want this to become impossible. Okay, it's time to get serious. I always do my thumbnailing on paper if I can. For some reason it just works way better for me, and it feels lower pressure than being in that kind of like digital space. So the way that I do this is I basically just sit in front of my computer so I can quickly glance up at the character designs that I've set out, as well as my, I keep wanting to call them lyrics, like all my prose, all my writing that will be in the book. And I just do these tiny little thumbnails. I actually made the like thumbnail frames out of pen so that if I wanted to erase one entire page, it wouldn't erase away the guide that I'd created. I think instinctively I didn't even do a lot of erasing because I felt the time pressure. Everything was taking much longer than I expected it to. And even though I did have 2 pages that I did some alternate versions of, I had so many extra squares that I ended up just putting them underneath the possible images that they were going to replace. As I made these little planning sketches, I tried to imagine them in their actual spreads. Like I tried to make sure that they would flow together nicely or not look too similar actually, as you would hold the book open. I don't plan on publishing this or making it a real thing, but it's still something that I kind of wanted to be in practice of. I also had to resharpen my pencil at this point because I had been drawing for long enough. These Blackwing pencils are very fun, but they are very soft as well. well, so they need to be sharpened constantly. This is actually the exact same way that I do thumbnails for my professional comics, though in this case it's a lot easier to actually see what I'm drawing because I'm not drawing tiny versions of comic pages that also have tiny little panels in them. So as for the file, I just looked up the dimensions that are common for board books online and put down a little grid to make sure that I was putting the center line in the right place. After that, I just put in all my little thumbnails. I directly took a picture of them with my phone and just slapped them all in there. I'm going to ink directly over these super loose little thumbnails, again because of the time issue. In a sense, this might actually make things a little bit harder because they are so messy, so we're kind of drawing from scratch, but on the other hand, I just wanted to get going on the final art as fast as I possibly could. I was very eager to get the cover done as well, because I started to fear that the cover was going to be the only thing I could actually color. There was a lot of terror and panic in this cutesy little children's book challenge. Probably because I only gave myself 24 hours, but regardless, this is the cover I came up with. I originally had a plan to have the main character girl on the cover, but the story really is about finding the dragon, so I'm kind of trying to put the imaginary child who would pick up this book in the position of the primary character of finding this dragon, of looking down and seeing it. That's kind of the image or the feeling that I wanted to have, and I was trying to use kind of this dynamic spiral shape to make the whole thing look more exciting. My dragon is very lizardy and tiny, and it has this big mischievous eye, so I wanted to make sure that it was really kind of exciting, like it would look cool on a shelf or whatever, and I kept the little rainbow horn that I'd played around with in the sketchbook. The grass spirals out so it brings your eye in towards this dragon that's also in kind of a spiral pose, and everything sort of points at its bright yellow eye. For the colors, I tried to keep everything kind of like muted and cool, with an exception of the bright yellow eye and some of the browns underneath for the soil. The typography was of course miserable because I hate typography, but I think it looks okay for hand-drawn. Now that I'm done with it, I wanted to bring it in and replace this fake cover that I sketched out, and I'm also going to sample some colors out of this cover, just as kind of my guide for future coloring of future pages. And then it was time to get right into laying out all of the text over top of my little thumbnails. So I'm directly copying the writing, of course, that I already wrote out, but I have to actually rearrange all the text boxes and make sure that everything fits and is not going to cover up too much of the illustration. This was a little scary because I didn't actually do a good job planning out how much space each block of text was going to take. This is something I was notorious for when I was doing some of my first comics. I used to actually draw out the word bubbles before I wrote the text, which is kind of deranged, and when I realized that that's not the right way to do things, everything got a lot easier. But frankly, I was having flashbacks to those dark times when I was finding like way more text on some of the pages than the others. Now, pretty soon I'm going to crop in so you don't see all of this, but I wanted to show you how I was using the sub view to actually check my character design. This helped a lot with a character that I wasn't really accustomed to drawing and had just designed, so having that sub view up the whole time really helped, though it definitely did clutter up my work area quite a bit. I tried to simplify the style even more a little bit and make sure that I was just drawing in a way that was cute but did not take too much time, or I didn't have to like belabor the details and it would still look adorable. I made lots of little like decisions about how I would stylize her as I was actually drawing each of these. So you can see I changed up her mouth. Originally it was much more cartoony, and I feel like it looked more like a children's animation looking than a children's book, if that makes sense. This is all very vibes based, but it didn't seem to fit the style that I was building with her, so I ended up doing a much simpler, smaller mouth. And drawing this initial scene where she discovers the dragon was really important. I wanted it to feel exciting. Drawing the dragon also was really uncomfortable for me at first, because obviously I'd never really drawn a design like this over and over before. That's one of the things that actually makes comic making so much easier over time, is eventually you can draw your characters without like even thinking about it. That's something I did a lot on the book tour. In Europe, when you do a book tour, you're expected to draw a little illustration alongside all the book signings that you do. So I actually ended up drawing like Planchette and Babs and Sun so many times over the book tour that now I'm pretty sure I could do it with my eyes closed. But this is something that happens even just through the process of comics. So this was definitely something that I didn't have on my side for this project, because I literally just drawn these guys for the first time ever, and then I had to launch into actually illustrating this book about them. But I pretty quickly got a hang of how I wanted to stylize this very simple like smiley face girl. It was actually really like fun and rewarding trying to get these like 2 dot eyes and this big, very simple smile into the facial expressions that I wanted. I also wanted to try to lean into the comforting kind of nature of, again, like a Sanrio character, where they're not over expressing. They have a bit of a blank face, which allows you as the reader to sort of input more of your own feeling onto them. That's something I kind of wanted to include, while also making sure that she was dynamic and helping communicate the story. It's a difficult line to walk, but the actual drawing of these pages took so much longer than I had hoped. I was pretty exhausted by the time we got to this point. This is where I felt like I was really struggling to like keep going, but I knew if I took even a small break that I may never pick up the pen again. So I just persevered. I tried to make sure to do lots of things that would make the later coloring process easier, such as making sure to do some like inking that kind of filled in what might have to be other colors or like complicated shading in the future. Spoiler alert, there will be no complicated shading in the coloring of this book. I almost didn't color it at all because I was so running low on time and so exhausted that I almost skipped it. I don't recommend this challenge, by the way. You are welcome to try it, but I don't think I would be a good influence on you guys if I said it was a good idea. At least I didn't do this 24 hours straight. Like, I slept, I took breaks. It was like a cumulative 24 hours. Otherwise, I think I would have actually gone insane and given up. But even so, I barely got this done in time. These final pages, I was really struggling with. I didn't really like, this is probably my least favorite page, honestly, this one to the left. But I just kept pushing forward, and I was actually really happy with a lot of the scenes where it was pulled back a little bit and we get to see more of the background. I really utilize line weight to help control like where you're looking, or how the whole image is appearing, because I was kind of doing everything just on one layer. Like, obviously the text is on a different layer, but all of the inking, like the background, the little hatchy lines, usually I would separate these things, but I kind of just drew it all together, and it actually wasn't as bad as I thought. For the coloring, I quickly realized I had to come up with a strategy because I had to do this really fast. So I ended up making kind of a rainbow monochrome book, where each page is a different color of the rainbow, but I would keep consistent like tone for all the characters throughout. So while the book would be changing color every single spread, the characters would still have like a internal logic to like her hair being darker than everything else. Her hair is always the same tone as the dragon. Her shirt is always really light, and then there's always like a mid-tone that I'm using for like the mid-ground and the background. And this worked pretty well. This was a very fast way to color this. It's not what I had visualized when I started this challenge. And initially, before I decided on this style of coloring, I was originally going to just give you guys the black and white images without the text and let you guys color it however you wanted. and then I thought maybe later we could take a look and like make a little booklet out of some of your guys' different pages and see how all the different coloring styles would look together. Let me know if you want me to do that. I could put it on my Discord and you guys could color it in for fun if you like, but I just didn't feel good about ending the challenge without even having any colors, so this is what I settled on for the video. So now for a dramatic reading of The Dragon Under the Rock. Outside in the backyard, I was looking for bugs, searching for slugs, black beetles, and grubs. But in my search, I had such a shock. I found a dragon under a rock. She squiggled and wiggled like a worm in the mulch, not even as big as a stout-bodied loach. As soon as I saw her, my heart was set. This little dragon will now be my pet. I took her inside in both my cupped hands. I probably should have made pre-dragon plans. She played in the curtains. They started to burn. I yelled, "Dragon, there's rules you must learn. You gotta play nice and don't mess up the house." The dragon was busy ripping up my mom's blouse. I wailed, "Dragon, why are you being so bad? You're wrecking my stuff and you're making me sad." But then I noticed when I took a breath, she wasn't just naughty, she was shaking with stress. I went back outside and set the dragon free. We could play in her home, my dragon and me. This is roughly based on the true story of when I took a big potato bug into the garage in my little bug cat keeper and it chewed through the wires and escaped somewhere into the house. Thank you so much for watching till the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to Milanote for supporting the channel. Again, if you want to check that out, check the link in my description, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much to my wonderful members and patrons, including Philip Verbicario, Celery Sticks, I'm a Potato, Prince Piplup III, Honey Kitten, Nee Nico, Novel Goblin, Loro, Dada, Lily McFarlane, Artist James, Skitten, Gold Pikachu, Clad, Songbird Galesworth, Sunshine, Whimsic, Asri Cryptid, Hoodle Doodle, River the Goblin, Raz Tarosh, Kobe Octo VTuber, Graveyard Moss, Grexius, Maddie Momo, The Midwestern Menace, CB, Lucy Amajiki, Live Live, Raven's Crow, Zocelot, T-Hill Music, Jabber Dabber Doo, Light Jewel, Kadaria, The Expressive Poker Face, Tsubaki, Cutie Pie, Ice Cream Pal, Kola, JJ Jade, and of course, Libla Bubla.